Welcome to another episode of Viatorian Voices, Conversations on the Way. As young adults head to college, some big questions arise and get asked many times. What do you want to major in, and then what do you want to do for a career? In college, you may try a few different majors and types of classes, and eventually you work your way to a degree and toward next steps, a volunteer program, graduate school, job applications, different jobs and roles within a career, and more. Over the course of a few episodes, we want to talk to different Viatorian young adults who are a bit further down this road, and invite them to offer some insights and reflections about how they work through it. We hope their insights and discernment experience can benefit those working through discernments of their own. These episodes are an extension of our Viatorian Young Adult Accompaniment, a network of Viatorian-connected young adults in college and postgrad life who stay plugged into Viatorian life through our private Instagram, through regular check-in texts and DMs, through some online avenues including a faith-sharing group and GroupMe, and the friendships they sustain among themselves. To join in, request to follow at ViatorianYA on the way on Instagram, or visit bit.ly/YA on the way, all lowercase, to share a life update with us and get looped in. Today, we'll talk to two young adults who are teachers. Georgina Martinez grew up at Viatorian-founded St. Thomas More Catholic Community in Henderson, Nevada. For college, she went off to Grand Canyon University, and she graduated in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. She went on to earn a master's in education from GCU, and now works as a kindergarten teacher in Clark County Public Schools. John Paul Manfredi grew up at St. Viator Catholic Community in Las Vegas, where he also attended elementary school, and now his kids go there too. He went to high school at Viatorian-founded Bishop Gorman High School. For college, he studied theater and psychology at the University of Notre Dame de Namur, and later earned a master's in theology from the University of Notre Dame. John Paul now teaches theology at Bishop Gorman High School. I'm Pre-Associate Dan Masterton, and it was my pleasure to host this conversation for us. For starters, I asked our guests to think back to college and share how they worked their way toward their majors and plans of studies. You'll first hear from Georgina and then from John Paul. Enjoy the conversation.
I actually started as a pre-med major.
Oh, wow.
I thought I wanted to be a doctor because, everybody says sometimes not the greatest things about being a teacher, And so I was like, well, I love kids. I was like, I could be a doctor and I could be like a pediatrician, and that might still both of my different passions. I always loved kids. But so I thought I was going to be a doctor. And then I took my first biology class, and I was just like, immediately it felt wrong. I was like, I truly, even learning just like the basic simple stuff that I had already learned in high school, I was like, I don't care. Like which sounds so bad, but I was like, it doesn't inspire anything in me. Like the littlest part of the cells or whatever that we were learning, I was like, I really don't care about all this. Like it doesn't do anything for me. And so I went to a Christian college, like a non-denominational Christian college is what Grand Canyon University is. And every floor has a life leader that does Bible studies. And so no matter what faith you are or what translation of the Bible you are, everybody just comes together and we can just meet. It's like all women on the floor. And so we can just meet and just talk about life and something like that, which is really great, especially going to college. Like it was in Arizona, and so I was far away from everybody. There was one girl who was one of my roommates. She and I went to St. Thomas More together. And so we were roommates, and so we did know each other. So we went to this Bible study together. And the girl who was leading the Bible study, she was actually an early childhood education major. And I remember just thinking, like, that sounds like so much fun. Like hearing her talk about the stuff that she was getting to learn and the little projects that she was getting to do to learn how to be a teacher, like that sounded like so much fun. And here I was like miserable in my biology classes, like hating it. And so it got to the point where I was like, you know what, like there's a reason that sounds like so much fun. Like it's what I should be doing. Like as much as people were saying like, you don't make any money, like it's so hard, it's like so draining to be a teacher, I was like, but it just sounds like so much more fun. And we had like a meeting in the beginning of school where they were like, yeah, so you'll do your 4 years of pre-med, and then you have to study for the MCAT, and then you have to go to 4 years. And I was like, that sounds awful. It sounds terrible. So props to the people who can do it, because I was like, I can't do this. So I just changed my major. It was literally the first semester. So I didn't miss out on much, and I'd already gotten some prerequisites out of the way in high school. So it all kind of worked out.
Nice. Well, I give you credit for being honest with yourself and not pretending to like something that you clearly did not have a passion for. What about you, John Paul? How did you work your way to your major in undergrad? Do you have anything you were deciding between or any major changes you had to do to get where you got?
I was a theater major in undergrad.
Okay.
So, yeah, I didn't expect that. And I had So I double majored. Theater was my major, but then I also had a second major in psychology because it seemed like the responsible thing to do was have another major in addition to theater. And I had gotten a scholarship to do theater at the university that I went to, the small Catholic university in San Francisco area. And so as far as like choosing my major, it was kind of chosen for me, at least one of them. I had to be a theater major in order to receive some scholarship. But I wanted to. I mean, I loved theater. I loved acting and doing all that. And psychology, not nearly as much. I mean, I got the degree in psychology, but I don't. My wife always makes fun of me that like I don't know anything about psychology besides like id, ego, and super ego, and that's about it. That's all I got. That's all I got.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was nothing that I thought I liked it at the time, but I was really there to study theater, and that's really where I thought I was going, and what I was going to do, in some way, either continuing to perform, or I think I always had in my mind that I would eventually be teaching theater because that's what happens for most actors. So it was always kind of like teaching was always an option, but teaching what I teach now was nowhere near in my frame of mind at all. So.
Yeah. So when did that inflection point come? How did you kind of pivot or start to combine your passions and your interests a little bit differently, maybe later in undergrad or after you graduated and started to look at, career paths?
Yeah, so my senior year of college, I had a kind of an existential crisis, I guess you could call it. And I really started to like seek out, answers to the questions that I had about my faith, which was, pretty dormant during college. Say. So I really started to like search for answers to those questions at that time, and had kind of gone on this sort of journey, I guess you could call it, of trying to better understand this Catholic faith that I had been raised in, having a lot of questions about it, not really fully understanding it anymore, not really being on board with things that the church taught at that time in my life. So really just wanting answers. And in the midst of that was pursuing graduate school for acting, and which is a lot. There's a lot that goes into that, and ended up getting waitlisted at a bunch of different universities. And in the meantime, started teaching theater at my alma mater, at Bishop Gorman High School here in Las Vegas. And whilst kind of going through this kind of spiritual awakening, if you will. And then while I was teaching theater, it was a very part-time thing. They needed a theology teacher. They actually needed a theology teacher twice in one semester. And the first time I didn't get it, someone else got it. And the second time I was like, I threw my name in the ring, and they hired me as a permanent sub to teach theology. I had no theology background. I went to the high school and I went to a Catholic university, and those were my credentials. But it was for a permanent sub, and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with teaching. I fell in love even more deeply into my faith because I had to teach it. And from that point, I was like, well, this is what I want to do. And the principal basically said, we're very happy with what you've been able to do without a theology degree. You need to get a theology degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that makes sense. That seems fair. So that's how I ended up going to Notre Dame for my master's in theology. So yeah, so that was kind of the trajectory, the weird path that I took to where I'm at right now. So yeah.
Yeah. A theme of these conversations seems to be that as long as you're present and faithful to each step, they seem to kind of still be useful and play a part in the steps that follow, but maybe it's a little clearer in retrospect than it was at the time. And I'm sure you can see ways, even not necessarily with psychology, but maybe with your theater background, that bleed into the way you teach or the way that you love teaching and the way you are in front of your students.
So yeah, I pretended to be a teacher for a long time. So the acting came in clutch.
It does come in handy.
Yeah, absolutely. I also met my wife doing theater, so that I have no regrets about that path whatsoever.
That gift that keeps giving. What was your path, Georgina? How did you look at grad school and a master's program? Did you work first? Did you go to school first? Did you kind of do a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. So I actually graduated like right before the pandemic. Like mine was like the very last, like 2019. I like skated in the last semester. And so I had no idea that the world was going to change the way that it was going to. And so I started actually working at a Montessori school that I had done a little bit of like pre-service with, because my thought was like, oh, I'll just wait until the school year starts, and it'll start in August. I'm like, it'll be fine. And so I just kept on working there for like the rest of it, because I graduated in December. So I was like, I'll just keep on working until the school year's over. And then the pandemic hit, and I all of a sudden became like the only teacher for like a bunch of little kids during a pandemic. Like they didn't shut us down for very long, because technically it was like a childcare center too, because I was working with toddlers and infants. And so it was just like a very weird time. And then when I did start applying for schools to like work at in August, it was all going to be online, which was just like a weird thing to think about, not at all what I had imagined. But they were actually opening up a new Catholic school in Las Vegas, an elementary school for St. Francis of Assisi. And I had initially applied there thinking like, oh my gosh, that'd be so fun to get to like integrate my love of teaching with my faith and get to work at a Catholic school. And then they ended up telling me that I needed more experience because it was going to be my first year teaching. And so I was like, okay, like I'll just, I'll see where else I can get some experience, with like the thought of like maybe like, and I'm still, this is my 4th year teaching. So I'm like, I still feel unqualified. I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing. So honestly, kind of like a blessing in disguise, I feel like, because there's so much to learn and so much to, I don't know if I'll ever feel qualified, but maybe that's something that my path will lead me on one day. But for now, I was working at a few different schools, and now I've settled on the same school that I've been working at since last year. I'll be working at next year. And so I kind of got my master's degree about like a year after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, just because everybody was telling me like, you got to keep going while the momentum is there, because otherwise it gets harder and harder as you get older. So luckily GCU offers really great like alumni scholarship that I was able to use. So I got done with that in about, it's like a year and a half. So I got that done in 2022.
Nice. Yeah, there's definitely a momentum factor to continuing with school if you think that's what you need to do or you want to do as you move forward in your career. So it's a good thing to get done and have on your resume for the rest of your career. As you think about teaching, getting into it a few years now, teaching is not the most lucrative profession, we all know. And sometimes you have to leave some money on the table in order to get, the shape of life you want or the type of work that you want. The inverse of that can be true as well, like maybe in a business role where you're making more money but finding less fulfillment in the work you do. So it's an interesting calculus you have to address. So as a teacher, Georgina, do you feel like you're fulfilled in doing something that is true to your passions and who God made you to be? Do you feel like there's some discomfort with maybe making less money or having different, stability or shape of life than some of your peers have?
I feel like I never lie when somebody asks me like, do you like being a teacher? And I'm like, yes, I love it. Like it's my favorite thing ever, because there's something so special about getting to create a relationship with these like most pure, innocent little kids. Like as troublesome as they can be sometimes, they're so innocent. Like they look at you with just like stars in their eyes, and they just tell you everything about themselves, and they want to like be near you all the time. I think that's something kind of unique to kindergarten. But like people will walk in the room and I have like kids like on my knees, like they're all like just so like gravitated towards me, which is just like so fun, because like next to their parents, like you become like their person, like they're with you for so many hours of the day, and you get to teach them all kinds of like new and exciting stuff. I mean, especially in kindergarten, like we get to do crafts all the time, and my school is really big about doing a lot of like fun days. Like there was a day that we transformed our whole hallway into Super Mario World. And in my classroom, I had just like big old Nintendo Switches next to my board. And we just played Mario Kart. Like all the kids like rotated around all the classrooms. And I was like, well, like hand-eye coordination. I was like, it kind of fits in like to stuff they got to learn, like fine motor, gross motor. I was like, it works. So we can get away with a lot of fun stuff like that in kindergarten, which I think is the best part. It's not like so high stakes. Like once you get up to high school, like they got to graduate because they got to go to college, right? But once they're in kindergarten, it's like we can have some fun days. And we just like decorated for reading week. We did like castle themed, and we had just like magical, like fairy, like some fun stuff like that. And the kids just, they love it all. And so when I get to like spend my days doing that, like creating magical experiences like that for kids, like it doesn't matter at the end of the day that, I'm not like my friends who are like nursing majors. Like my 2 best friends, they have 3 12-hour shifts, and then they're done, and then their weeks are so free, or they can take like 2 weeks off to go on vacation whenever they want, and it's not like on the regular vacation times that everybody else has, and so everything is busy. All of those like little things I feel like doesn't really matter when I'm like, I truly love what I do. And I can see how somebody would be unfulfilled if like they didn't like it, because like teaching is something I feel like you could easily fall into and easily just get like stuck in, but you have to love it if you're going to enjoy it for like the next 40, 50 years, I don't know, 50 years, if that's how long I'll be teaching.
Yeah, if you're going to do it as like a lifelong career, your heart needs to be in it or you're going to burn out for sure.
Yeah.
How do you look at that, John Paul, especially being, a little further into adult life and having a wife and children? There's definitely pressures to provide for your family and to have a stable living. How
Maybe
do
that's the
you?
other thing I
Yeah.
should say too. I only have my dog, so
Yeah.
me and my dog.
Yeah, so there's different
Yeah.
considerations.
It's always been a consideration. It's always been a concern for me is how do you, how do you raise a family on a teacher's salary? And for most of our marriage, my wife has not worked full time. She still doesn't work full time. She works part time. So that's always been really helpful. You make it work. I mean, you just make it work. We make sacrifices. Obviously, we don't go to Hawaii on spring break. We're here, right now. Literally, we don't do those we don't go out to dinner a lot. We certainly live more simply than most of our friends. But it's you sacrifice those things that's, I guess, seem necessary when you're accustomed to them, but then once you're not, they're not necessary.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it's definitely a sacrifice. And there's been times where I've considered, other professions and doing other things simply because of money. And my wife has always steered me in the other direction, back towards teaching. And it's always worked out. There was a period we lived in San Francisco area for a while, and there was a point where the city of San Francisco had like no cop. They were like just begging people to become cops. They were offering I think it was like a 20 grand signing bonus just to be a cop. And I thought about it. I thought about it for a while, and there was actually a teacher at the school that I was at who left, who took the job as a police officer in San Francisco, and it looked very, as far as money was concerned, it looked better. But ultimately, my wife was like, "You're not going to be a cop," and I was like, "You're right. I'm not going to be," because I love what I do. Think I'm pretty good at it. My students seem to think I'm pretty good at it. My colleagues, and it is. I also see it as a vocation. So it's not as easy as just like, a change of career. Even when there's been times where I've kind of been tempted to think about that, I'm reminded that it is a vocation and that it is something that I really do think I'm called to, especially as a theology teacher. I do see it as a vocation, so it's not as easy to just walk away from a vocation than it is for a job.
Yeah, it has deeper roots. It's like more deeply seated in who you are, for sure. So as you
Yeah, yeah.
describe your work in that way, do you look back on, teenage years, college years, post-grad years? Do you see ways that your prayer life or your spiritual life or the way that you kind of reclaimed and owned your faith as an adult have put you in this position or have helped you get to this point, John Paul? Is there anything you can identify along the way that was particularly impactful to you in your spiritual life?
Yeah, I mean, I think my whole life, my whole upbringing has kind of put me in the position that I'm in today. I don't know if I really ever had a choice but to be a teacher, so in some sense. I went to Catholic school my whole life, from pre-K, literally through grad school. I've been in Catholic school, so it's always been a constant part of my life. My mom has been teaching in Catholic schools before I was born, like 40 years. So it's always been a huge part of my life, an important part of my life. And I guess I saw my parents making the sacrifice for me and my brothers to go to Catholic school. So it was always just something that was valuable, seen as valuable. And so as far as going into teaching, it was always something that I could imagine for myself. And as far as a vocation, I certainly had experiences in my life in high school and in college and whatnot that I felt like kind of set me on a particular trajectory, at least like spiritually, which it's hard for me not to see my faith and my interior life as sort of tied up in my vocation as a teacher. The two are intertwined for me. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but that's just kind of how it's been since I've been an adult. And so as I grew in faith, becoming a theology teacher made more and more sense and became something that I wanted to do more and more and became more attractive over the years. So
It's kind of almost like an arc of destiny that's kind of been like, steeping there for a long time.
yeah, at least
Um,
that's what I tell myself.
yeah, it's convincing. I'm convinced.
Thanks.
Um,
Yeah.
Georgina, you kind of mentioned the Christian context that you were in at GCU and the way that some of your peers helped you. Are there other parts kind of orbiting around that, maybe from beforehand at St. Thomas More, or from things that you've kept going for yourself after you graduated from college and came back to Nevada?
Yeah, I think I definitely had like a strong faith that helped me at St. Thomas More. I was always helping out with religious ed. Like as soon as I got confirmed, I was helping out being a young disciple for their life teen program. And then I was teaching, I forget what grades I did, but I did some like grades of religious ed when I was like a high schooler, just like helping somebody out teaching those. And so it definitely helped give me like a little bit of a background about what I might like to do. And then it was always so nice to like come home and help out in the youth program. Our youth program had to shift a little bit since COVID. So we got some new leadership in our youth program. And so one of my great friends now is in charge of the like high school program, and I help her out as much as I can. And it's funny because like I'm a teacher, but sometimes when I've given like talks to the high schoolers, I will like use some methods to keep the kids' attention, because a kindergartner's attention span and a high schooler's attention span is pretty similar. And I feel like the same kind of things like candy and like little movements help
I
them
can
keep
confirm
their
that.
attention. Yeah, so it's kind of like it's funny how I'm always like, oh, I don't feel very like qualified because I'm a kindergarten teacher. I don't teach the big kids, but they're very similar, and you can get them, by being just really genuine, a little bit of bribery. The kids can get you. They'll do whatever you want to do. So
There's transferable skills for sure. To teenagers or college students or even like young adults who are considering potentially getting into education studies or trying to become a teacher, is there any kind of like stories you would want to tell or any insights you'd want to share about the path that you've taken and the work that you're getting into now? Like what kind of stuff would you want young adults to know if they're potentially thinking about getting into education and trying to become a teacher? Is there anything that comes to mind that you'd want to pass along to them?
I think definitely to keep a balance. Like as I was setting up for this Zoom call, I realized I left my computer at school for all of spring break. And I was like, oh, like I could go get it. And I was like, but like it's fine. I can just like use my iPad. I was like, I didn't even bring my computer home. And I feel like a lot of times teachers end up getting burnt out because it becomes their entire life. And you can very easily make it be that way. And I feel like especially, as I get older and like I want to make sure to keep that balance in mind, because if you go home and all you're doing is teaching and you're not paying attention to your family or your animals, your pets, or anything like that, like it could be very easy to get burnt out. And so I feel like as long as you keep that balance and then find things that fulfill you and stay involved with other things other than school, like as long as it doesn't become your whole life, I feel like it's a pretty manageable thing. And you have to teach what you love. Like I could never teach high school theology, but you might say the same thing about kindergarten, where it just takes a very specific skill set to do every kind of school. Like some people are made to be middle school teachers, some people are made to be high school and made to be elementary school. Like you just have to have a certain feel for what it is that you like, and then you go. And I feel like shadowing teachers and like seeing other people that you admire teach really helps as well. And so I feel like if there's that little voice in your head that's saying like maybe I might like to be a teacher, but like I hear so many bad things, like you just have to talk to somebody who might be in your same situation and who could give you some encouragement, because I definitely had teachers on both sides like telling me different things, but once I listened to the ones who I feel like had a very balanced life, I was like I could do it. It's brought me more fulfillment than I think any other career ever could have.
Yeah, that's great advice, especially because young teachers in particular can get picked on to be moderators for after school stuff, or when you're in middle schools and high schools to be coaches for athletics programs or bus drivers and chaperones. And
Yeah.
pretty soon you can lose your life balance and just get totally
Yeah,
out of
right. They're
whack.
like, you don't have any kids, like you have extra
Yeah.
time, and it's okay to say no. It's okay to, keep that balance. Like as much as my school does a lot of really cool, fun stuff, but we all do it together to lessen the load on everybody. So I think it's important too to find like the right work environment, because public school or private, like Catholic school, like either way, like it's the people around you who will really make or break your experience.
Yeah, that's well said. What would you offer, John Paul, from your experience?
I would say if it's something that you're considering, I would encourage young people to to pursue it. I think when you're I remember being a young teacher without kids, or when I first started teaching, I wasn't even engaged yet. And it's when you're young and you have all that like freedom and free time, I think it's a little bit more, it's certainly more manageable, though there's that trap of getting sucked into like everything, especially if you work at a Catholic school where they expect you to do everything while you're there. They expect you to coach, they expect you to moderate, they expect you to do everything, and they're not going to pay you for it. You can edit that out if you need to. um, it's easier in some sense. As you get older, it'll become more clear as to like where your boundaries are and what you're going to say yes and what you're going to say no to, what you have to say yes and what you have to say no to. So I would say if you're considering, it's actually a great career when you are like, you don't have kids yet, maybe you're married, maybe not. You have your summers off. You can go travel. All of my young teacher friends go to Europe in the summer, and then I had a buddy of mine who he walks the Camino like every few years because he's not married and doesn't have kids, and that's what he does almost every summer. So it's if that's something that, if you want that, if that's something that's important to you, having that amount of free time and the ability to go and do those things, being a teacher like affords you like two months in the summer to go do that. You get a spring break, you get a Christmas break. So there are like some real practical benefits, I think, especially when you're young. I would also say you'll know real quick whether this is what you're supposed to do. I think you'll know. Most teachers quit in the first 3 years, I think, 5 years, something like that. And it's because you know whether you're cut out for this or whether this is something that you're really called to, right? And most teaching contracts are 1 year. You commit to something for 1 year, and in that year, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about teaching. You're going to learn a lot about human beings in general. Give it a year. Like if you think there's something you might be called to or something that interests you, do it for a year. Try it out, and because you'll either feel it, you'll know like this is cool. I like this. I'm called to this. This is beautiful. This is what I want to do. You'll be on fire for it, or you won't. And if you're not, move on. If you feel like it's something for you, pursue it, and then you'll know if it really is or not. And if it's not, that's okay. But don't be afraid to jump in because you've heard things or you're worried about all the things that you might have heard or your fears. There's good reason to try it out, I guess.
That's all for this episode. We thank Georgina and John Paul for their insights and pray for their continued success and fulfillment in their work. Viatorian Voices Conversations on the Way is a production of Viatorian Vocation Ministry. The Viatorians are professed brothers and priests together with women and men lay associates who proclaim Jesus Christ and his gospel and raise communities where faith is lived, deepened, and celebrated. In the footsteps of Venerable Louis Querbes and under the patronage of St. Viator, we strive to do everything well so that through us, Jesus may be adored and loved. To learn more about our community, visit Viatorians.com or follow us on social media at ViatorianUSA. Those seeking support and accompaniment in exploring God's invitation for them are invited to reach out to Vocation Ministry. Send us a DM on social media or email vocations@Viatorians.com to start a conversation. Young adults seeking to engage with the Viatorians and other Viatorian young adults can request to follow our private Instagram at ViatorianYA on the way to connect in. On behalf of Brother Peter and the Viatorian community, I'm Pre-Associate Dan Masterton. Venerable Louis Querbes, inspire us. St. Viator, pray for us. Adored and loved be Jesus.